So Ohio State changed something that usually is during the last week of the season. It was 2 weeks ago now. It's just we were focused on Penn State at the time. They usually bring the band into practice, and the players kind of participate with the band, and the starting quarterback constructs the band and does all these different things. They actually move that to the bye week. This is not the first year they've done it, but it's been moving further and further away from Michigan week. And Stefan, you asked why they decided to do that. Why did they move that off of Michigan week when that's been tradition for years on years on years?
Yeah, the answer was that they wanted the routine of a game week to be just like a routine for any other game week, right? I mean, Ryan Day has talked so much about how he wants things to say as routine as possible. He actually had a point in the press conference where he talked about his message to players of sure, some things that he says and emphasizes probably become mundane and boring and you get tired of hearing it, but that's how you have to approach it, right? That's how he talks about every week. It might be boring because you've done this Wednesday practice a million times, but you got to do this Wednesday practice again, and everything has to kind of stick to this routine in order for things to work out, as you plan on Saturday. And this is kind of part of it, and it kind of makes sense. When I saw that they had moved it during the bye week, I was like, yeah, bringing in the band and doing this fun thing doesn't really make a lot of sense to do during the biggest game of the regular season. So doing it during the bye week too makes sense. And the reason I think what Ryan Day told us is true as well is it's not like they moved the band coming into Purdue week and you're okay, so you're still changing the routine of Purdue week, but you're not, you don't want to change the routine of Michigan week. You moved it to a bye week, so your routine for game weeks can stay the same. So that's kind of the approach that they're taking, and I think it makes a lot of sense, right? But I think it's also kind of a representation of how we've seen this team and this coaching staff this year talk about the rivalry, and maybe they addressed it, in the off season. But Caleb Downs had Julian Sand as a guest on him and his brother's podcast. I think it was either last week or 2 weeks ago. Yeah, Josh Downs. Josh had asked Caleb and Julian about Michigan week, and props to Josh. He was kind of hey, I know you guys don't want to look ahead, but you could say that I'm not playing college football, so I know that you guys are looking ahead to Michigan. And the way Caleb answered the question was hey, let's stop overthinking this. I think he showed up last year. He went through the rivalry route last year, and now that he's one of the captains and they're going into it this year, and it's very on brand with Caleb's personality to be don't overthink it. Just don't overthink it. And that's kind of seems like the approach that they're doing. Hey, because they used to do senior tackle right as well during Michigan.
And they moved that off of that week as well.
They moved, last year they made that change. So it's how about instead of doing all this stuff to remind you over and over and over again that it's Michigan week, what if you just treat it like any other game week? What if you talk about it like any other game week? What if the bringing in the band, the senior tackle, just change, treat it all like a normal game week? That's probably the best thing you want. Ryan Day I think he very indirectly talked about you also want to treat that opponent, you do your best thing, you scout that opponent just like you would scout a Purdue, just like you would scout a UCLA, and that makes me wonder is he saying to himself a little bit hey, don't try to beat this team a certain way just because they're Michigan. Approach Michigan as if it's a black and white, you're watching film in black and white, you don't even know who the other team is, and you're just looking at their tendencies and where you can beat them instead of saying we have to beat them this way. All signs point to they're stepping back and not without devaluing the rivalry, are saying, hey, let's at least in our preparation, celebrate the rivalry to the max when you win the game. But in the lead up to it, don't try to overthink it and make it into something that it's not. And I feel moving the band was probably a microcosm of this shift that I'm sure a lot of Ohio State fans hope is happening in terms of how this coaching staff specifically approaches that game.
Andrew, if they hadn't lost 4 straight, would the band be moving off of Michigan week?
No. I think it was that they lost 4 straight, but I also think it was how they lost specifically last year, where it's been talked about ad nauseum by us and by everybody about that famous team meeting that happened where basically the players and Ryan Day were hashing it out what the hell happened against Michigan. And they figured it out, and basically it took a lot of players saying why did we do this? Why did you put us in this situation? Why did this happen? Why did that happen? And I think Ryan Day was looking at it going, I put this game on a pedestal, which I think he did in the wrong way. It deserves to be on a pedestal. Ohio State, Michigan, and will always be on a pedestal. But let's face the facts. Ohio State won the national championship by losing by losing to Michigan, but in the same season they lost to Michigan. That's never been possible before. That's never been even remotely an idea before. Now it is, and it is possible for the team that loses that game to win a national championship, win a couple playoff games, right? They might see them again depending on how things go. Like Michigan wins that game this year and Michigan gets into the playoff at 10-2, they could play Ohio State again. It's possible. Like I think that is why Ryan Day is doing this, because he's saying we need to take it with the intensity and we need to do everything we can about this game, but we cannot make it into something that it is not. I think Ryan Day wanted to eliminate the circus. He wanted to eliminate the whole kind of everything extra that comes with it. And it was because of last year, I think, that, they bashed their head into a wall. Like literally, Kenneth Grant and Mason Graham were the wall, and they just continually bashed their head into that wall, and they didn't really change it. And I think it was because they had this idea of how things were supposed to happen. Well, Ryan Day probably looked at it and looked at the things holistically and went, all right, well, things don't have to happen that way, and I think that's why we're here.
I think they lost 4 straight, and now they're looking for reasons to fix it. I think we're allowed for that to be the simple answer. It's not saying that the things that he's talking about are wrong. In fact, I kind of agree with him. I think going through the playoff run last year gave you a routine of like, okay, this is what works, this is what doesn't work, which is why he didn't just make it about the rivalry. He brought in how they handled the Washington game, how they handled this past game. I do agree with that essence of this. But the reason why the band thing is no longer happening game week, the reason why the senior tackle no longer happens that week is because they've lost 4 years in a row. Because both of you guys are correct. There's also years and years of all that circus happening that week, and Urban Meyer went 7-0. Yeah. And Jim Tressel lost the game once. And it's okay to acknowledge that. We're not – you lost 4 straight in the biggest rivalry in college football, and you got to find a way to fix it. And the first thing you do is start, okay, let's simplify, but also let's just play better football. Which is why so much is riding on this Michigan game this year. Because, sure, like you can eliminate the circus on the front end. That's because there is a circus on the back end if you win the football game. There is now a carrot of Heisman Trophy. I actually don't know if losing to Michigan is going to cost them a trip to the Big Ten Championship game. I think we got to see how some games play out at this point, right? But Heisman Trophy, #1 seed in the college football playoff. All those different things, there are still things on the line. I don't think the circus disappeared. It's just the things that they can control about the circus have disappeared from this. So that's the answer. Yes, they lost 4 years in a row, and they're looking for things to change, and they're starting with some of the things that are maybe more culturalistic college football things so that they can focus more on the football element so that if they win the game, they can have everything they want. You win the game, you're probably going to be the #1 seed in the college football playoff. You win the game, somebody's winning a Heisman Trophy. You win the game, somebody's winning a Biletnikoff Award. Whatever else, right? They might have like 4 or 5 guys up for individual awards who have the chance to win those, and none of that's possible if you don't win on November 29th, which is why for the next 4 weeks, it's officially Michigan week. Get the text, 614-350-3315. 2 week. Did I say the whole number? 614-350-3315. I did say the whole number. 2 week free trial, $3.99 after that. Andrew, Stefan, Steven. Happy Michigan month.